Let it be known, there is a huge difference between being a great tradesman and being a smart business operator. It's almost a parable. You see the highly skilled tradespeople which fail in business. The same applies for tradespeople that are actually in the manufacturing game. Now, this happens quite a lot, and we've got a lot of clients and colleagues and listeners and viewers out there which might be in a space like joinery, for example, and although they're extremely good carpenters, they're never really experienced in the manufacturing game, which is kind of what joinery is. So in today's podcast, I'm talking with the Joinery Coach about this specifically, making that segue. We cover off on some amazing things, actually. It's a fantastic podcast. We dive a lot into mindset, a lot into business principles, a lot into systems and organizational structure. The point is we're trying to communicate, I suppose, to you guys that if you are in that position or you're considering making that move into that sort of business, you need to be receptive to the fact that what you currently know potentially won't help you succeed in that realm. So guys, enjoy the show. I'm sure you're going to love it. I look forward to hearing your feedback, and we'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye. Today's podcast has been proudly brought to you by Tradie Web Guys. Tradie Web Guys work with tradespeople only on their websites and marketing solutions to help them stand out from their competition. Everything from web design through to SEO, search engine marketing, content creation, you name it, guys. It is a customized solution for trade-based organizations, and it's fantastic. Head across to tradiewebguys.com.au/apply, fill in the form, and let's have a conversation.
Giving tradies and contractors around the globe the tools to run a modern business. You're listening to Toolbox Talks from the Site Shed. Now here's your host, Matt Jones.
Bruce Poling, welcome to the Site Shed podcast.
Hey, Matt. Good to be here.
A fellow podcaster.
I am. Yeah, we were just sort of in our infancy, nowhere near you, but certainly having a lot of fun with it.
It's a great opportunity. Just talk shit with cool people. So, Bruce, you're the Joinery Coach.
Yes, I have a business called the Joinery Coach. I try to make it clear that it's not just me, but it's a pretty fun business we're running. And yeah, we've been having quite a lot of success in the last 3 or 4 years. Great.
Despite the accent, you're actually hailing from Melbourne, Victoria.
I'm what I call a Kanazi.
Yeah, cool, mate. Thanks for reaching out. It's great to have you on the show. Essentially, the name of this podcast we've titled, You're Not a Trade Business, You're a Manufacturing Business. And essentially, we're trying to, I suppose, communicate the difference between those guys that might be running joinery businesses or something similar, and they're sort of stuck in that building mindset where in reality, it's quite a different industry being a manufacturer. I know for certain I have a couple of colleagues, friends and clients that are actually in the joinery business, and they will be very interested to hear, I suppose, some of these things that we talk about today. It's one of those things, isn't it? Like we talk a lot about as tradespeople making that segue into being a business owner, but then there's also another segue, I suppose, where you go from being like a trade business owner into a manufacturing business owner, right?
So true, yes.
None of these things, by the way, are you ever taught at college
or trade school.
Do you want to give us a bit of a background about your story and how you got to where you are?
Sure. I'm like a lot of people that run joinery businesses, except I don't run one anymore. And I did experience all the fun things that they experience, which is burnout and trouble with not spending enough time with my family, missed my son growing up. A lot of those things that people are experienced or are experiencing right now. So I went from being a cabinet maker to a business owner, but I recognize now early on in that transition, I was actually more interested in the business side of things than the trade. But in my mind, I don't know if anybody knows Thomas Chippendale. He was one of these great cabinet makers back in the day, and I wanted to be the next Thomas Chippendale. But I don't really think I ever had the chops to be that good as a tradesman. So it's a good thing I transitioned into business. But I ended up having a business for many, many years, and we had some highs and some lows. So I'm kind of one of the lucky ones. I consider myself lucky because I did hit a point where I was able to make a really clear decision. I remember it very, very vividly that the decision was, I'm not doing this anymore. I'd burnt out. We'd hit a point in business where it just really got too hard for the last time, basically. And I knew I just didn't have it inside me anymore to get over that hurdle. We could have kept going, but we had really high highs and some really low lows. So I'd made a decision at that point that I was going to go out. At that point, you were called a consultant. At that point, I didn't really know anything about being called a coach. So that was in about 2002, 2003, and about that time. So sold my business, lucky to sell it, fortunate enough to have made it worth enough to have sold it. Most people don't even get to that point. Sold my business off, and one thing led to another. I ended up working for a software company and was paid to travel around and see all kinds of businesses. Now, I thought this is going to be great because I'm going to be able to stretch my skills and teach people how to build cabinets really fast and how to run a CNC machine really well and all that kind of fun stuff. Now, I did that, but what I actually experienced was a lot of business owners that had been in business for 30 years, and it's just like they were still in their first year. They had never really grown their business. They just figured out how to kind of survive the whole time. It was a real eye-opening experience because, when you're in your own business, you kind of think you're the only one with these problems, and you don't realize that most people are doing the same things with the same problems and the same struggles you are.
Yeah. So I'd love to dive into a little bit. I mean, I'm sure it's a bit of a hot topic in our community and podcasts we've covered over the years on the fact that you actually sold a joinery business. So let's not brush that one over, because I know there's a lot of listeners out there who would love the idea of one day selling a business. In fact, we've covered this topic quite a lot. It's great to have someone that's actually been there and done it. It's actually great to have a coach as well that's been there and done it, but I should qualify. Tell us a little bit about that process, because I know we talk a lot about, like system implementation, and actually only on Tuesday, I did a 3-part series with Dave from System Hub on, systems and his new book and that kind of stuff. And I'd love to hear how that process went. Was that in Canada or was that in Australia?
My last kitchen cabinet manufacturing business was in Canada.
Okay, cool.
Now, I'm not going to toot my own horn on this one, because if I'm to sell a business now, it'll be very different. I got kind of lucky. I stumbled across a customer who we were doing a house fit out for. He happened to own a hardware business, like a Bunnings sort of thing, or a Mitre 10, that sort of a store. And he wanted to absorb something like that into his business. So he decided to buy me out. And all the stars kind of aligned at the right time that I was ready to just get out of it. So it just kind of worked out that way. But I don't think he would have taken it on if it wasn't something that had a good reputation, and that wouldn't, he wouldn't have taken it into his business if it wasn't going to align with his brand.
You can say that, but essentially, if the business didn't have certain boxes ticked, then it wouldn't have been acquirable. So let's talk a little bit about what some of those boxes are.
Well, we had good people, first of all. I had some really good staff working for me, and that was obvious because they would walk over hot coals just to get work done. Mm-hmm. Still really close with those people today. In fact, my shop foreman became one of my best mates. I still stay in touch with Rob regularly. In fact, I talked to him last week, and he's doing really well. He's gone out and made his own installation business from all of that. So
shout out to Rob.
Yeah. I had a good team, and I look back now and I don't think we had good systems, but at the time I think we had exceptional systems. We had great ways to record job tracking, all that sort of stuff. So back in, 97, 98, when I was running this business, we actually started taking on design software. At that time, it was called Cabinetware. And so that was one of the systems that my business, one of the first in the area to actually take on, was, it was part of how we ran the business. Draw the kitchen, push a button and produce a cut list, and then the guy in the saw was going to start cutting parts.
Right.
We were relatively advanced, and we had really good suppliers too. So without really knowing it, we ticked a lot of the, how do you sell a business boxes sort of thing. But I don't know that our financials, over the years, our financials look good. At that particular point in time, they didn't, but they had 2 previous years. So we had pretty good history financially.
They're important things, and that track record is also an important thing. I mean, we've had guys on the show specifically talking about how to buy a company or how to sell a company, and that's, one of the things. Like, you could have a good financial year, but what are the other, was it a lucky year or was it an unlucky year? Like, anyone who's actually acquiring a business and knows what they're talking about will be able to dive into that. Yeah, that's cool. And so essentially for him, it was an opportunity to add a division to his existing organization, which he could sort of bolt on, I guess.
Yeah, and for me, it was an easy out.
Right.
I knew I wanted out. I didn't know what I was actually going to do at that time, but I knew I didn't want to be doing that anymore. So, and for me, that's sort of my message going forward too, is I'm not necessarily saying to any of my people we're talking to, whether they're clients or whether they're not, I'm not saying you need to sell your business. What I'm saying is if the road that your business is on is not taking you to the destination you want to get to, make a decision today, like right now, today. Mm-hmm. Make a decision. Don't wait any longer. get on a different road, and whatever that takes, get on a different road today. Because if you can't sit here right now as we're talking, listening to this, if you can't say that this business is unequivocally going to take you to where you want to be, whether that's more money, whether that's more freedom, whether that's more meaning, giving more back to people, whatever that is, whatever you started a business for to achieve, if that's not getting you closer to it right now, this is a little morbid, but I often say, look, if you were lying on your deathbed right now today, what would you regret? It's not going to be that you didn't make enough money or you didn't spend enough time in business. It's about you didn't have enough time with your kids. You missed your kids growing up. You didn't spend time with your wife. You didn't spend time for yourself. So the sooner you can start achieving those things that you might regret, the better off you're going to be in life, I think.
I think they were pretty much Steve Jobs' dying words, weren't they?
Something like that, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think basically that mindset is kind of a metaphor for life. I mean, sure, business, but we preach this all the time, like just try and be as agile as you can so you can make those shifts towards the directions that you want to take it, whatever that might be. It's not always money either. Like some guys, we've got a lot of clients, especially over at, in Tradie Made Pro, that a lot of those clients, especially, they've figured out that a lot of the highest money-making services that they offer are in fact the ones they end up dropping because they're also the highest stress, the highest resource heavy, and often the lowest profit margin. It's just good to keep the guys busy kind of mindset,
Well, it's almost never about money. Money comes when you're sort of, we're talking about being in flow state these days, about being in your genius position. Like when you love what you do, that comes across, and money seems to follow that. But if you put money in front of it, money eventually drops off because you're not loving what you do, and that comes across as well. So it usually, like you say, just drops off.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, I suppose, the joinery side of things and maybe your experience as being a carpenter, then making that segue into running a manufacturing business, because as we've sort of touched on before, there's sort of two very different verticals.
It's an eye-opening experience when you actually immerse yourself in higher learning. From being, for a lot of people that I meet, being a joinery business owner means that you did your trade, you did your 4 years, you learned how to build cabinets or, whatever you learned. And from that point forward, never to do any more further education. I think that comes from a lot of us never really did well at school. We kind of sucked at school, so we didn't really want to go back to it. And that represents most of us men who were boys that didn't do well at school. So,
but I mean, that's my message has always been through the site shed. Like, just because you're not intellectual doesn't mean that you're not smart. And some of the smartest business owners that I know, not academic so to speak, but they certainly are not idiots.
And I think it's how you define academic, right? I think we're more than we think we are because at school we were taught that we weren't smart. When in actual fact, we were very smart.
Yeah.
The teachers just didn't know how to teach us. They knew how to teach the top third and the middle third. They didn't know how to teach the bottom third. So we kind of missed the learning experience in many cases.
And this whole system is geared towards academia as well. Like it's not geared towards getting, I mean, if you go over to, say, Germany, like 50% of the kids that go through school now end up in some sort of skilled labor.
Yeah.
That's part of their curriculum now. Like they encourage that sort of thing, and which is amazing. And we sort of do a little bit here, but it's becoming more and more prevalent. Funnily enough, one of the things that we've found, like I was sort of representing the trades, if you will, at a Department of Education event a few years back down in Canberra. One of the big problems that arose was like the systemic mindset that's been passed down from parents to children. Your dad might be a lawyer at Cooper's, and he's, you're going to be a lawyer at or you're going to be an accountant at Cooper's or whatever at KPMG, and the kid's like not academic. And so that mindset, like instead of saying, well, okay, maybe you're not academic, why don't you go and apply that what you are good at, which is using your hands, like apply to a trade or something like that. Like that's quite a big obstacle for a lot of teachers and kids.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of the people that I meet anyway are a little bit stuck because they never really advanced themselves. In the back of their mind, they know that they're smarter than maybe what their resume says or whatever we want to call it, but it holds them back in business because starting a business is much like starting a new apprenticeship. And if you don't ever start that apprenticeship, you just stay at the same level that you were at when you first went out in business. And so certainly one of the biggest hurdles is to get people out of the tradesman mindset or what we call the technical mindset. And it's a big hurdle for a lot of people. It's almost like it's in our DNA. When we went to school, a lot of us did shop, and then we went and did a trade. And then, so we were taught how to be a tradesperson. And that ingrained a lot of habits in us that are mostly around project type management, like step one, step two, step three, step four. And we're often taught how to do things in a very linear fashion.
Yeah.
That's actually works pretty well if you are a tradesman. And if you're a plumber or electrician or someone like that works on one project at a time, that mindset will actually serve you because you're getting through, that project pretty well. But there's a big difference between project and process. And when you get into manufacturing, it's a completely different animal. I started studying with an organization called APICS. It was the Association for Production Inventory Control Management. And that's a CPIM certificate. And it really opened up my eyes. That's where I started learning about lean manufacturing. And I kind of went, oh, and like every week, there's another light bulb would explode on my head. Oh, I get it now. Oh, I get it now. I wish I knew this 10 years ago when I was actually running my business, And so the whole lean manufacturing concept and everything that it brings is so important when you're running a manufacturing business.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're able to get people to explore that fully, it's like, oh man, I can actually do 50% more work in the same time because, I'm doing multiple things at the same time rather than just doing one project that flows from one to the next. So, the big transition for a lot of business owners is to get them to get out of the tradesman mindset, have potentially tradesmen or skilled people in their business. That's true. But they have to get up a level or two, maybe or 10, and understand that they not only run a business, so they've got to have business skills. That is, as you know, it's marketing, it's pricing, it's strategy, it's a different animal again. But we've also got to have a very strong manufacturing approach to this because a lot of times cabinet making businesses get lumped into the wrong category. We're a trade business or we're a construction business. And we're not at all. Like we manufacture goods. And maybe 10% of what we do is about the install. But really 90% of everything that a business that manufactures joinery does is pure manufacturing. And that I think is the biggest hurdle the industry needs to get over is, I always compare it this way. Like if you want to get a factory full of great people that are doing great things, imagine that that's just like a kitchen. Would you hire 5 Gordon Ramsays and throw them into a kitchen? Could you imagine the chaos? Could you imagine the yelling and screaming? And
it'll make for a good TV show, that's for sure.
Oh man, it would be awesome, wouldn't it? But that would be the chaos that would ensue, right? So a lot of businesses have like 4 or 5 Gordon Ramsays in their factory.
Right.
Really good tradesmen, like really good skilled cabinet makers. But they got their own thing going on, and they don't often, and that's often where a lot of the chaos happens in the factories.
I think that also is certainly not relevant to just manufacturing. I mean, I know a lot of our colleagues, clients, community, they've had issues where they're trying to implement process. They're trying to get some sort of consistency to the finished product, the delivery of how they operate their services. And to do that, they implement systems. They get people to follow it. And the biggest pushback they often get is from the experienced people that have been doing it. I've been doing it my way for 30 years. I'm not going to do it this way.
Let's do it this way. Don't do it that. Yeah, exactly.
And so very often, I mean, I know a lot of the guys out there that are listening to this are going to go, that's exactly what happened to me. They've had to chop the most experienced person on their team and get rid of them because they just simply wouldn't follow the processes, which then affects culture.
Yeah.
And when you've got one guy who's like really experienced and he's got all this, wisdom and stuff, and he's really good at what he does, the younger guys and the less experienced people will look up to him all the time. And if he's not following process, they won't follow the process and the culture just diffuses,
We see it all the time where we've got kind of two groups, right? And people that we've worked with over the years, particularly recently where we're really getting some traction in this area, we guide them through the recruitment process.
Yeah.
When you really look at what you want, a human to do in a factory like this, almost none of it requires trade skills. The reality is you've got a CNC machine. Okay, so you need someone to put a board on the CNC and push start.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm a tradesman, so sometimes I get criticized for saying that I'm anti-trade or anti-apprentice, which I'm actually not. I want a business to be so successful that it can actually have a successful apprentice, not drive them into the ground thinking they should be efficient in production. They should be there to learn their trade skills. But for a business to be successful, you've got to have the right people in the right places. And having a tradesman running a CNC machine, I don't think is the right position. It wouldn't be for me as a tradesman anyway.
Right,
I would get bored very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or feeding an edge bander. That's not a trade skill.
Yeah.
I'd go so far as to say putting square boxes together, not really a trade skill either.
Yeah.
It's a process.
I completely agree with that. Actually, I think I was talking, might have been Tuesday morning when I was recording a podcast to a fellow saying the same thing, So we were talking about like the advancement of training for skilled trades in the space of virtual infrastructure, like virtual reality and that kind of stuff. And we're saying how, like, even when I went through my apprenticeship, I served the first few years of my apprenticeship in the maintenance division, where you get exposure to a huge array of different problems that you need to solve. Whereas a lot of my, friends at TAFE and then later when I went into sort of the more of the construction space, you basically spend a year doing a rough-in, or you'll spend a year doing stack work. Like, you don't learn anything. I mean, you learn
the same thing 1,000 times.
There's a big gap there when at the end of it, you both have your license and you're both qualified, but one guy's done a lot more than the other guy just based off the work they've been exposed to,
That's actually a really good example of what's wrong out in the world right now. Is when I did my apprenticeship, probably wasn't long enough ago to know what a real true apprenticeship was. But if you go back far enough, apprentices were people that came into a business, and the business would give the tradespeople time with the apprentice to learn their skill, to hone their skill. They'd be taught how to sharpen a chisel. They'd be taught how to do all these true trade skills, and it would take away from the production of the business, and they would do it knowingly, right? So the goal was to nurture the apprentice over however many years, and then eventually you've got a highly skilled person that's going to be dedicated to the business. There's been a shift over the years. I don't know where that shift happened, but apprentices, for some reason, at some point became cheap labor.
Yeah.
And I was at a trade conference sometime towards the end of last year. We were talking about apprentices and how we can get skills back into the industry. When we talk about there being a skill shortage, see, I don't actually think there's a skill shortage. I think that what's happened is we've treated apprentices so badly that they just don't tell people about this great experience. So we're not actually nurturing more people to come into that role. Like if you talk to an apprentice in a cabinet shop, just broadly, just talk to one and ask them, how's it going? What's your experience like? And then they're going to go, oh, as soon as I finish my apprenticeship in this place, I'm out of there. I'm going to go to a different place because they treat me like shit.
Yeah.
Well, how would that ever encourage another person to go into that position?
Yeah.
And
I think that as well kind of has like a systemic tie to it. Very often, probably the business owner went through his apprenticeship like that. So that's what he knows,
Exactly.
So that sort of gets passed down through.
It is. It's a cultural thing. And so I don't think it's a skill shortage at all, because we're not short on people.
No, that's right.
We're short on making that particular role attractive enough to attract more people into it.
One of the big things I've been taught over the years through speaking to, gurus like Al Levy, the 7-Power contractor, is, and Danny Kerr from BT Academy over in Canada. Like, if you want to build a strong team and you want to recruit and you want to hire good people and you want to retain good people, the difference is in providing them with a career path as opposed to a job. And that's really something that we've implemented in our business, and it's made a huge difference because people can come into our organization knowing where they sit in the organizational chart and where they can move to. And it doesn't take a lot of work to build that out, but it makes a huge difference when you can communicate it to, people, even at the apprentice level. Like, this is where you are. Obviously, you need to serve your apprenticeship, but then, in 4 years' time, or 3 years' time even, I'd love you to be managing projects,
Yeah.
So that's a big difference. And I completely agree with you. Like, I don't think business owners take the time, spend enough time with their apprentices or staff in general, just training them and like sort of getting down on their level and finding out where, what their issues are and what they need to learn, I think sometimes we just get so busy running the business that we overlook all this stuff, which is not ideal.
And we see the transition, like with businesses that have brought in good people into their business. Like, we have a client that we're working with, and around Christmas, they needed someone in their factory. So we said, right, let's not advertise for tradesmen anymore, because what's happened in the past, you've advertised for tradesmen, you get 8 apply, none show up, and the ones that you do hire don't work out anyway. That's just the unfortunate reality of that situation. That's not to say there aren't good tradesmen out there, they're not available at that time. But why don't we look for a good process worker? So let's put an ad in Seek that's in transport and logistics and in process working categories.
Yeah.
They had 310 applicants. Now, this is in Brisbane, just outside of Brisbane, not that far out of, a major center. 310 applicants just slightly after Christmas time. Yeah. Can you imagine 310 applicants? So they had to actually shut the ad off. What they actually did is they gave themselves options. They whittled it down to 65, and then they ended up, we're going to shortlist 15. They got down to the first 6, interviewed the first 6. One didn't show up for work, the first one, the second one, the third one, but they got to the 6th person on the list and he worked out exceptionally well. That's the reality. There's all kinds of good people out there.
High, slow, fire, fast.
Yeah. You can find people to do the skills that you want, but you've got to have good process for them to follow too.
100%. And that is especially, I imagine, in a manufacturing business, because I mean, I've been guilty of this. I've said it on the podcast a million times, that whole, before I knew what I know now around hiring and around organizational structure and around system implementation and, onboarding, before I knew all that, you would go and put a job out for somebody, you would hire them and just say, this is your job, go and do it, without equipping them. And of course, they can't do it because you haven't given them the right instructions. Then they don't do the job properly. You fire them, blame them, oh, they're shit. But in reality, you're the dickhead. You're the one who screwed it up because you didn't give them an opportunity to start properly, So it was doomed from the beginning. And you see that all the time. People hiring, looking for a plumber, like, job ads, need a plumber, need this. Like, okay, that's fine. But then, like, beyond that, what's the onboarding process? And most people have that mindset of, well, if they're plumbers, they should know, which is ridiculous. Like, you can't, like, plumbers aren't going to know how you want to run your business. For example, when I was doing my apprenticeship, and this is another issue, like, you look at modern trade businesses and then you look at sort of older trade businesses that have been operating for 30 odd years, and some of the processes that they use in those businesses. Like, one of our clients recently, we've just totally changed them from, we've moved them into G Suite, into the cloud.
Right. Yeah, nice.
And they're like, what is all this? Like, that they can't get their head around it. I was on the phone with one of them yesterday
came out of the bubble for 5 minutes.
Right. But I mean, they still have that mindset of, you print everything out, you save it in filing cabinets. But the thing is, like, if you don't get exposure to new ways of doing things, how could you possibly know? I mean, we're kind of preaching to the choir here. Obviously, we're talking to people that want to learn and they're listening to podcasts and they're investing in, this sort of education. But for the better part, I mean, that was my experience going through my apprenticeship. Like, I mean, mind you, that was quite a while ago, but it was very much carbon copy invoicing. It was very much, paper driven and, some of the processes. And I was like, great, this is how you do it. This works. This is fine. But then I went to when I moved to another company, and you realize, oh, these guys actually use technology and they take payment on site, and they don't have anybody chasing debt because there is no debt. And you're like, hang on a minute, that's a way better way to do it. But you know that unless you've seen it, right? I mean, I imagine in a technology driven space like manufacturing, I mean, those segues must be a dime a dozen.
It's interesting, because in our industry, you would think that everybody has already got a CNC machine and design software. But not everybody does. There's still a lot of people that are still cutting on a panel saw and doing cutlass. And all that's really happening is you're getting farther and farther behind, and you're going to eventually get to a point where you won't be able to catch up. And that's true with any business right now. Like, we talk about growth, and there's two kinds of growth. There's obviously growth that's going to grow your business. We call that right sizing. But there's also organic growth that you need to have as a system in your business that keeps you up with those things you're talking about. It has to be done with intent. You have to intentionally get outside of your bubble on a regular basis and look at what else is happening. You might go to, some of the trade shows around the world, or you might join some sort of a group or something like that where other people are doing things. But you have to do it with intent. There has to be some sort of a system or something in your business that says, okay, once a month, what are we doing in this space, in this innovation space, right? And because if you don't, the risk is that you get so far behind that your business is now not competitive, and you might be out of business pretty soon.
Yeah, I mean, and you see it all the time in the marketing space. I mean, well, we do anyway, because that's sort of our thing. But companies that they'll come to us and they say, okay, we admit it, we finally need a website. I'm like, what? You need a website? Like, because that's the reality. Like, no one's looking in yellow pages anymore, and no one's calling the phone numbers on the sign writing on your car anymore. They're just Googling you.
Well, there's a really famous company that failed in this one quite badly, but they were a multi-billion-dollar business. Their name is Kodak.
Yeah, I was going to say, is it Kodak or Nokia?
Yeah, and no, we're fine. We'll print on paper for the rest of our lives. That digital printing, that'll just be a fad. We don't think that's going to take off. We're fine over here on our own, and look what happened. So, but everything else about that business was exceptionally productive and efficient, right? Just one little thing. So we've got sort of 9 major things that drive a business. One of them is innovation. And there's 9 because any one of those 9, if it's far enough gone or far enough at risk, it risks crippling your company. And that's an example of that. Innovation on its own can really hurt your business.
There's so much to be said for like taking time to strategize and think, isn't there? I mean, we get so busy, caught up running our businesses that, that we don't take time to sort of sit down and have a look at that ecosystem and just sort of think, how can we make like these incremental improvements in various different departments? And like, that is such an amazing, powerful point of leverage when you can sit down, even if it's like once a month or whatever, just spend a couple of hours focused on something, to do with how you can improve a part of your process.
Yeah.
I think as business owners, we just get so caught up sometimes in swinging hammers and, laying pipes that we just don't, we don't take that time, or we don't find the time. The time's there. We just don't prioritize it. It's like most things. We all have the same amount of time in a day. I know it's a cheesy paraphrase, but
yeah, it's true.
But the reality is, like, as business owners, you need to find time for doing these things. It wasn't until maybe 3 or 4 years ago when I actually took it upon myself to, instead of making excuses saying I suck with finance and suck with numbers, learning it, and every week getting in there and visiting my P&L and looking and reconciling my accounts. And since I did that, the business exploded. But that ignorance was holding me back for so long that I wish I could go back in time and slap myself in the face and just say, learn this now, because as a business owner, these are important things you need to do.
Well, the old cliches kind of hit home after your learning allows them to, right? So if you don't know your numbers, you don't know your business.
Right.
And that's so true, because we make sure that with every person that we're working with, we look at their numbers every single month at least.
Right.
Because your numbers are what we call a lag indicator. They've already happened.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't want to let that go on any longer if it's bad news. You also don't want to let it go any longer if it's good news to celebrate. Right. You want to celebrate as soon as you know you've had a decent win. So those sorts of things, knowing your numbers, is a key element of knowing how to run your business. I often describe, not looking at your profit and loss in an accrual report, by the way, not cash. So we look at it in accrual. So it's, like in a perfect world, if you paid all your money that you were supposed to pay, and if you collected all your money you're supposed to, what would the health of the business be? That's really what we're asking. And the results will show up in your monthly P&L. So if you're not doing that, I often compare it to like driving down the road without your dashboard in your car working. Nothing's working. How are you feeling? Like, you're just nervous. You're stressed. You don't know what's going on. You don't know if you're going too fast. Like nothing indicates to you what's going well. So it's such an important thing to know your numbers. It's an area of our business that we've improved dramatically in the last 3 years, because like you, it wasn't one of my strong points. Marketing and finance were my two sort of weak points. And for the last 3 years, I've kind of immersed myself in that. And it's now one of our more focal points, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Well, and it has to be, if you could be the best insert trade in the world, but if you can't market yourself, you're dead in the water. Like you see it all the time. You see these dodgy, shitty operators, and there'll be listeners and viewers out there laughing, going, "Oh my God, all my competitors suck. I'm way better than them." That's great, but they're better marketers. Deal with it. Like you can learn that. So go and learn it, I think that's just the reality of, like we were saying before, like you need to be agile. You need to be willing to learn. And of course, again, we're preaching to the choir here a little bit, but like there's areas of business which are paramount. And if you're not the person for it, then you need to bring people into your organization that can replace you in that section so they can do it good and you can focus on doing what you need to be doing.
There's an interesting thing, like when I look back, my last joinery business, when we mapped out the years, all the years that we were in business. And of course, you had your highs and you had your lows. But we looked at some of the years we did exceptionally well. And I wanted to know what was actually happening in that time that allowed us to do exceptional things. Mm-hmm. Without exception, without a doubt, every single time I looked at those years where we grew or our revenue grew or our profit grew, whatever happened that made us say, hey, we're doing pretty well, that was always times when I brought consultants in to help me. Huh. So we had a major growth spurt when I had a consultant. I'll never forget him to this day. I communicate with him occasionally. His name's Norm Starling. And he was one of those consultants in the industry at that time that would go around to businesses like mine and provide them with help. Now, he taught me back in 97 about cost plus pricing. Mm-hmm. And Norm wasn't young when he taught me, and an old guy taught Norm. So this isn't a new concept. It's not like he came up with it. It's in beta testing. This is,
it's proven.
The numbers just add up this way. And if you do it this way, your business is guaranteed to be more profitable than it was. The numbers can't do anything else other than add up to be profitable. So just do your pricing this way because it'll make you. So I learned for the first time about how to truly price my work based on cost of my business, material, labor, and overhead. Yeah. How do you have a formula to put those together so that each job considers all of those, and at the end of the month, we're actually making profit? So when we looked at, what impact that had on our business, we went from like a 4 or 5% net profit position up to a 15% net profit position in 4 or 5 months.
Wow.
Holy crap, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And the only reason that happened was because I was willing to open up, to allow someone to come in and teach me something.
Yep.
Now imagine if you do that every single year, like if you know, and this is probably the hardest thing, is that a lot of businesses don't open themselves up to being guided by someone else. So they only know what they know. You know, you don't know what you don't know. And if you can learn what you don't know, you're going to do so much better in life and in business. And what you don't know is in somebody else's brain. Allowing them to give you that knowledge is going to benefit you. But there's so much resistance to that.
The guru Peter Cox told me, you will stay exactly the same if it's not for the people you meet and the books you read.
Yeah.
And I think I'd probably throw into that mix today, podcast. And, you know, it's true. Like, you need to be receptive to these sort of things. And you need to be, I mean, you don't have to be, people have this, I think, like, misconception with consultants, and probably rightfully so, because there's a lot of shonky ones out there.
There are a lot. That's true.
I mean, you don't have to always sign your life away with these people. Like, there's information there. You need to be receptive and make educated decisions based off information. And you need to also, I suppose, be willing to, and this is the way I look at it as well. If people have got different perspective on things, or something that I've always challenged, you've kind of got to be of the right mindset to say, well, hang on, what if there is something in what they're saying? And look at it from their perspective before you dismiss it. Because sometimes you get so stubborn, like as choleric personalities, you're like, no, that's shit, forget it. I do it with my own team. Like, they'll say, hey, how about we do this? And I'm like, that's a stupid idea. Why would you want to do that? And then I sit back and I'm like, hang on, let me, I've sort of got to catch myself halfway through it, you know, and sort of go back and have a look at it.
Often it comes down to how you approach it, right? And I've got a coach myself. I think, Matt, you probably have a coach.
Mm-hmm.
People that are doing exceptionally well in business, generally speaking, have a coach. I mean, you know, Bill Gates has a coach. So it's true that you need to get influenced by other people, but how that happens is so delicate, right? Because you get sold so much crap every day of the week. Like, go on Facebook, go on any social media, and you're just getting bombarded with crap that you're trying to be rammed down your throat. So there's this wall of resistance that's built up, like it's a kilometer thick. I get that. Mm. And the other thing I get is nobody wants to be coached.
Yeah.
You know, nobody wants to be told what to do. It's not what you actually want. So my advice to anyone is, if you're looking for somebody, doesn't actually matter who it is, if you're looking for someone to help you in your business, look for two things. First of all, figure out what problem you need to solve. Don't look for someone that you think can help you, because if you don't know what problem you have to solve, that person can't help you. They're just going to try and sell something to you, or that's how it's going to feel. So the first thing you have to know is, what are my problems? Like, what do I need to solve today? Do I not have enough leads? Like, is my marketing not working? Maybe you need some help with marketing. Is my pricing no good? Are my numbers not working? Is my production terrible? Do I have a lot of, whatever the problems are, be really, really clear about what your problems are. And then find someone that you can say with confidence, that person has helped hundreds of other people like me solve that problem. So you would have a high degree of confidence that person can help you solve, the specific problem you're looking for. So, your clients, Matt, people are looking for marketing help, right?
I completely agree with you. You very rarely find one coach that knows everything. And if you do, I'd run a mile, because it's bullshit.
That's why I have a team, because I'm really clear. I suck at most things. But I'm really clear in what I'm good at too. And I try and stay in that lane. And I've got exceptional coaches with me that do the other things that I suck at.
Yeah, exactly right.
And I'm happy with that.
And you see this all the time, the one coach trying to be everything to everyone. And I've never seen anyone do it well.
You can't possibly do it well. You can't have three different mindsets. You have one mindset.
And you're probably the same, but I've got like multiple people I'll call on for different things at different times, and I know what their skill set is, and I know what I can talk to them about, and I know the answers I'll get in relation to their area of expertise is going to be extremely good compared to whether I threw something at them they would have no idea about, So,
and that's one of the first questions we ask people is, what do you need help with? And what do you know about us? That's one of the great sales questions. Like, why me? You've called me. Why me? Why now? My coach that I got on board with asked me that question when I first eventually talked to him. And it's a real confronting question, right? He said, Bruce, I can see you've seen my stuff, because that, marketing now can see footprints all over things. And he says, I see you've been watching me. Cool. You've called me. Why me? Why now? Yeah. And I had to answer the question. It was just a great sales question, because I had to say, well, look, I have all kinds of problems in my business. Here they are. And I think you can help me solve them. Mm. Cool. When should we start? If you can get people to that point, then you're almost half over as far as onboarding new clients.
I think for the better part as well, that message should be better relayed with even the guys out there listening to this, like have that conversation with your customers. Oh, you've chosen us to build your house. Why us? Why now?
Yeah. Why us? Why now? If you can't say, I think you're awesome and I need it done right now, don't give too much more time to that person until they can answer those questions really well.
There's a lot you can learn from asking your clients questions. And there's a lot more you can learn from asking people that are not your clients questions. Like, why didn't you get the job? A lot of people don't want to hear that. They find that too confronting. I got one mate especially, and he's like, I would never, ever want to ask my clients why they didn't want to go with us. And I'm just like, that's a ridiculous mindset. Like, how could you possibly grow, with that mindset, And to be fair, like we turn more work away than we accept just because of who we decide to work with these days. We still ask that question, like if people for whatever reason decide they don't want to work with us, we try and find out why. And then we're hoping that their answer fits in with our avatar, right? Because then we know we're sort of on the right track. So negative feedback's not always negative.
Oh, it's winning, right? It's you've got to learn that stuff in order to change and to know what to do next. How you present yourself, if we talk about how to transition a trade person into a business mindset, you've done an exceptional job at it, Matt, where you've got to name the Tradie Web Guys. Now, before I had the name of the business, the Joinery Coach, our business was named Strive to Thrive. Now, I entered a program for myself to learn, like we were kind of the best kept secret, right? We had 3 clients and we were doing great work with those 3 clients, but nobody else knew about us. So, that's like a lot of joinery businesses. You're the best kept secret. Nobody, you don't know how to market yourself. And when I wanted to come up with a different name for my business, my coach said, well, to think of a name, have you ever seen the movie Snakes on a Plane?
God, no.
And I went, what? No. Cool. So if you're to go to the movie, what are you expecting to see?
Right.
Oh, yeah, movie, plane, and snakes on it. He said, just make your name like that. Okay, so that's what you've done, Tradie Web Guys. What would be the expectation of someone calling you? It would be, I'm a tradie and I want to get on the web, and that's it. So credit my wife, she came up with the name The Joinery Coach, and it's almost like to that day, we changed the name, and people that we were trying to contact were all of a sudden calling us going, oh, I think you can help us. And I'm going, well, for the last 2 years, I've been trying to call you. Mm-hmm. Why haven't you been responding? And it's, like you said, it's that alignment of your brand that puts you in that space where you'll attract the people that you want to work with.
I suppose you've got to be careful as well. Like even when I named that business, I think like I kind of prevented it from going global with that name because North Americans don't know what tradies are. Well, they're starting to. You kind of got to have a bit of planning in place when you do decide these things. That's why when I set up the site shed, from the minute I wanted that to be global, and it is global. It's a .com website. The site shed is a relevant construction term around the world, so on and so forth. We have these conversations with a lot of people that are wanting to set up businesses or maybe rebrand. What I typically say to them is, if you're wanting to ever pass this business on to another company, like potentially sell it, be careful of including your name and be careful of including your location.
Yeah. And
potentially, depending on the vertical, be careful of including your main service, because if they're trying to bolt something on, or if you're talking about, say, Bruce's pipe relining, that makes it very hard to add in hot water. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You kind of got to think about those things before you set everything up.
It's one of those hot button topics, right? Is someone started a business that's about them and they've represented it, whether it's their image, whether it's their name. That's actually not the issue. The issue is, how do you pass all of that branding on to everybody else that's in the business?
Right.
So that they represent that as well. Because even if you exit the business, oh, and by the way, exiting a business isn't a choice. It's going to happen. So you probably should start planning for it. Like, you know what I mean? Whether it's now or 20 years, it's going to happen. You don't have any choice in this one.
The difference is whether or not you get paid for it.
That's right. But oftentimes people have this image that's of themselves, and it's not so much a problem that it's of themselves. It's the problem that they haven't allowed that image and that brand and that voice to permeate through everybody else in the business, so that if they were to exit or not be the face of the business anymore, that message still resonates throughout the business, because people may come to the business because of that, but not because of the person necessarily, just because of what that person stood for. You see Bob Jane T-Mart, for example, still has Bob Jane
right
on. There's a picture of him.
Yeah,
I don't know if there's legalities around that, but it means something because he had history and meaning in the business.
Oh,
but he's not there anymore.
There's certainly exceptions, definitely. I mean, McDonald's. But I mean, I think for the better part, you see a lot of tradespeople setting up. And I think what happens is as well, when they start out, they normally start contracting as an ABN, as a sole trader.
Yeah.
So they register the name Bruce Polling Joinery, and then it turns into a company, and then it grows and grows and grows. And all of a sudden they've got this big business and they're trying to sell it to Matt Jones, but Matt Jones isn't Bruce Polling. So then all of a sudden you've got this issue, right? So I just try and say to guys, if you can try and address these issues in the early stages, you're preventing yourself from an inevitable shitstorm, 10, 20 years down the track.
It makes it way easier if it isn't your name on the business, that's for sure.
Yeah. And it also makes it a lot easier to market because you're not specifically tied to, location. I'm all for niching, don't get me wrong. And I promote it all the time. I say to guys, definitely, if you want to, niching is the way to go. But then you just, you need to be considerate, I suppose, of the bigger picture. And if that fits into your plan, fantastic. But if it doesn't, you just got to sort of have those things mapped out up front.
Well, you could have 4 niches.
Right.
We've got clients that are doing residential kitchens for homeowners, but they're also doing flat packing supply to the industry now. Those 2 very specific niches in the same business.
Yeah. I think the difference is, from a marketing point of view, when companies come to us and I say, okay, well, what do you want to be known for? And they say, well, I want to be the number 1 front page plumber in Sydney. And I'm like, that's a freaking disaster. You can't market that anymore. It's done. You've really got to, and even the guys that are, front page Google in, plumbing in Sydney, they're still targeting, like you said, little verticals within their marketing. They're targeting hot water. They're targeting block drains. They're targeting, general plumbing, tap repair, whatever it might be. That whole mindset around trying to be, the biggest guy in the industry or whatever, it's so old school. It just doesn't fly these days.
No, if your niche is too big, you're just going to be, I always say you can't speak European.
Right.
But you could speak the East German dialect if you chose to, and that is the difference. So if you did that, they're probably going to be attracted to you. But if you try and speak European, there's how many different languages in Europe? There's millions, right?
What are some of the fundamental, if not physical shifts, mental shifts, I suppose, that guys out there that are listening and watching this that might not even knowingly be in the manufacturing business?
Yeah, they don't know it yet.
Yeah. What are some of the things, I suppose, before we draw to a close, they really need to consider?
Well, I think probably the biggest thing, and this is a hard pill to swallow, but you're not going to grow your business. You're going to need to get your team to do that.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the hardest thing for a lot of people to swallow, because if you're a tradesperson, you're probably very into yourself. You look at things from a very, what can I do and what can I, very individualistic. So we've got to be very focused on team, because if you can convince people to move a mountain, if you can really convince them to do that, you just have to get out of their way and let them do it. So it's so important for a business to be focused on team. Now, the other shift that has to happen there is the business owner has to accept that he serves that team. That is a really hard thing to get your head around, because you often think that the team serves me. It's my business. They have to serve me because I pay them. But in order to really make this work, you've got to be in service to your team, because if you're in that mindset, you're going to do whatever it takes to make them successful. That in turn is going to make your business successful.
That's why we turn notifications off.
I thought I had. I don't know what's going on. But yeah, so that be in service of your team and build your team. That has to be the thing, because if we look at a business is not an inanimate object. It's a team full of people.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit like a sporting team, right? I've played sports all my life, and the teams that we won championships are a team of really average skilled people, but we work together really well as a team. The years that we were supposed to win, we're a team full of champions, and everybody just became individuals.
I think that's probably a really good framework for anybody out there that segues into, what we're talking about before, about understanding, how to build out an org structure and understanding how to process out roles and responsibilities and that kind of thing. Because until you do that, you'll never build a team, or you'll never build one anyway that knows what they're doing, that isn't constantly overlapping. Anyway, Bruce, I'm going to let you go and get that call. Thanks for your time, mate. It's been great. And for any of the listeners and viewers out there that want to get hold of you, the joinerycoach.com. is the website, right?
Yeah, we've got a pretty simple thing. If you want to have a chat, we don't sell anything to anyone because we don't have anything to sell unless you've got a problem to solve and know that we can help you solve it. So really, I'd just like to have a chat with people. Sometimes in our first 15 minutes, we can solve a problem and that's all it takes. And I'm happy to do that. If it's just a quick chat and I can just align someone's thinking in the first 5, 10 or 15 minutes, happy days. We don't have to onboard everybody into our program. It can just be that. So yeah, just a quick chat. And if you want to, we've got resources on our website.
Yes, the 10 steps, 10 problems every joinery business has and how to solve them. I'll link to that in the show notes, guys. So head across there and I'll link you to that page. And just a quick plug for your podcast as well, Bruce. What's it called?
The Joinery Business Hub, surprisingly. We've also got a free Facebook group as well called the Joinery Business Hub. And oftentimes we talk about stuff on the podcast in the hub. Oftentimes we're talking about your podcast as well. So it's a little bit of cross promotion happening there, which is kind of cool.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There's a fair bit of conversation going crossways there. So we enjoy just the podcast and just the conversations that come from it is really quite interesting.
All right. Well, mate, thank you very much for your time. For listeners and viewers out there, if you are in the joinery business or potentially in the manufacturing business and not even knowing it, then I suggest you reach out to Bruce and see if and how he might be able to help. Otherwise, look forward to hearing your feedback in the group. That's a wrap.
Thanks, Matt. Have a great day.
Ciao. Thank you for listening to another episode of Toolbox Talks. If you're liking what you hear, then you can head across to thesiteshed.com where you can join our community by signing up to our Toolbox Talks. You'll get sent a weekly notification, which is basically a highlight of everything that we've spoken about during that week, along with any other industry news that may be relevant or specific to the trades. If you're enjoying the show, you can head across to iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, where you can leave us a review. That would be fantastic, and all the reviews get read out in the show. Likewise, if you have any friends or colleagues that you think would benefit from the show and the episodes that we create, then please go ahead and share it with them.